Hello, welcome to another practical. For this one and a few next ones, we will do something different. I got a bunch of recordings of solo fights. These are not mine. And we will just look at them and I will comment on what's going on. I did not watch these fights in advance, so this will be like a live commentary. Okay, let's go. So we are, I guess this is Hookbill. Right, in Hookbill, Condors have fewer hit points and shield, so I presume this is something like Macro Warp Drive, Warp Disruptor, Shield Extender, and 2 Tracking Disruptors, medium slots, light missiles in high slots, and when some speed, maybe damage control, maybe full speed in low slots. Pretty sensible. Actually, mentioned about this feat in the yearbook that kiting hookbills are actually on the rise, because you have to fight against navy destroyers all the time, and you kind of need to kite. And hookbill is a sensible light missile kiter. You can fit a bunch of control on it. So yeah, and we are against 2 navy coursers. Looks like, yes, inside. Okay, so against a single navy coercer, it's very easy because you're essentially flying a hard counter. You just click orbit 20, apply to tracking disruptors, and then go AFK. Against 2 navy coercers, it's a bit more tricky because you will have to spread your tracking disruptors on each coercer. Otherwise, they will just melt you regardless of where fit. And with a single tracking disruptor, if we beam, I assume we still will be able to apply. So the main question here is, are these navy coercers beam fit or pulse fit? If pulse fit, we should be winning, and if beam fit, it should be a draw because we will have to bail most likely. Okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, pause again. So, like the esport micro here would be to just look at the coercers immediately because you have invulnerability on the warping, and you can kind of check if you need to just bail immediately or like poke and bail, or if it's a decent matchup. But it doesn't matter that much because you will see the feed from the log anyways pretty quickly. And he uses Q click to establish a movement vector. I never actually use it, but it works as well. Personally, I would align to one of the objects because you're against two navy destroyers, and if we are fitted in some kind of a weird way, like with scan booster or something like this, and they can actually start DPSing you before you apply tracking disruptor, they will melt you really quick. And in this case, it would be better to be aligned somewhere. For example, this is an object in the same vicinity as the movement vector he's trying to establish, so I would just align somewhere here or here to one of the asteroid belts. But again, it doesn't really matter that much. In this case, you most likely will just burn out of their effective DPS range before they can kill you anyways. And after that, you can decide on what you want to do. So it doesn't matter that much. Okay. So we're burning away, and we are applying tracking disruptor on both of them. And okay, they are pulse fit. At least one of them is pulse fit. Let's see on the other one. And I think another one is also pulse fit. Yeah. Okay. So these are 2 pulse navy coursers, and in this case, We should be winning this. Because under tracking disruptor, even if we use like a proper feed that can reach 24 kilometers with pulses, under tracking disruptor it will be something like 15 kilometers. And in this case we are pretty safe if the micro is good. So what we should be doing right now is ideally to keep one of them tackled and just DPS on one or the other, it doesn't really matter. When you push one of the coercers away from the grid, and then you just finish off the remaining one. Okay, this is pretty bad. So he burns too close to the to one of the coursers. Let me rewind. Is it like an auto orbit fail? Okay, so he Q-clicked on this movement vector, but this movement vector was not very good because one of the coursers was actually kind of going to intercept him. So for a long while, he just was approaching this Navy courser, and he ended up at something like 13 kilometers, which is, of course, pretty bad because now you start taking damage. And when he switched to orbit and started burning away, yeah, you can see it's like 5 seconds in the DPS range and you're already in structure. Okay, so now we are cool again. Yeah, so you just burn around them, essentially, and DPS down one of the coursers. Yeah, yeah. This is all fine. This is a bit too far. 47 kilometers, I think this you are just not not in the range to DPS. Yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Okay, and one of them just bails immediately. Um, for no apparent reason, to be honest. I think he was still... Yeah, he was still in armor. Yeah, I don't think these guys are together, essentially. They are in the same militia, but I don't think we're together. Because they don't really coordinate their movements on grid at all. So looks like they just try to catch this Condor, and then one of them got low and he just bailed and left the other guy to die. Which happens actually quite often. And they're actually in the same corp. It's kind of weird. But yeah, coordination was pretty bad. And you can see here, for example, this guy decides to bail, but this guy is not pointed. So technically, if you coordinate with each other, you can just bail together. Just align out somewhere, burn together in a same vector, and then just warp out together. But my practice shows that you can see here, and yeah, he tackles him pretty quickly. Yeah, so they need to be coordinated. Yeah, my practice shows as well that when you fight a bunch of guys and they almost never coordinate their warp outs. So even if you don't tackle one of them at all, they almost always leave the grid like one after the other. He drops a point again. If this Navi cursor was aligned somewhere, in general, if you are in this hopeless situation against a kiter that controls you really hard, you always should be aligned and just spam warp out. There is really nothing you can do. And if the point drops, you just immediately out. Yeah, but again, in my experience, people almost never do it. So when they get these like tiny windows of opportunity, they almost never use them. And now it's just, yeah, go AFK essentially. because Navi Coercer can't do anything. And the second Navi Coercer doesn't enter, which is, I guess, reasonable, because if you enter, the first guy dies and then you will die. And he loses a point. And again, you can see that if his Navi Coercer was aligned somewhere, he would have been able to escape. So a bit of a sloppy maker from the Hookbill pilot. And I assume this is it. Yep. So okay, a couple of takeaways. Yeah, in general, there is a reason why the majority of coercers, of Navi coercers and faction warfare are being fitted. This is because of this. Because a Condor with Tracking Disruptor enters the Plex and you're dead. If you use pulses, you're very easily hard countered. And the fits were a bit weird, because usually if you use pulse fit, you almost always go with brawling full tank. And these guys clearly were not full tank. They were very, very lightly tanked. So the fit seems a bit weird. From Condor pilot, from the Hookbill pilot, I think it was pretty decent. A couple of mistakes on positioning, but it happens almost every time. And a couple of mistakes with auto orbit. He dropped a point twice, which is really not necessary when you have so much control. Okay, yeah, it was a pretty good fight, pretty instructive. So yeah, see you in the next practical.